Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with fiction writer Kevin Chong. And for readers unfamiliar with your work, Kevin, could you please explain what it is that you write?
Lately it's been novels, and the last couple have been a little dark. My newest one is called The Double Life of Benson Yu. It's about a man trying to tell a story about his own childhood, and that story is in some ways evading the dark truth. And at some point, that truth catches up to him.
Uh-huh. Okay. So what can readers really expect from from your newest book?
Uh, it's a story within a story. It's set mainly in a Chinatown. It has swords. It has a narrator who sort of intrudes and talks about himself while a story runs alongside it. Um, it's a little mind bending, I think, in some ways. I think I've heard that described said about it, and I think that's not inaccurate. So those are a few of the things.
Okay. So what do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
I'm not sure what might draw readers to my book, but I know that the stories I like are twisty and they make
Mhm.
you think. And they make you think about, what, is real and what isn't real and how we kind of construct reality in our heads, at least those are the stories I really like. Be it like Susan Choi's like Trust Exercise or Ian Reid's I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Okay. So what was the inspiration for this book?
Well, there are a bunch of things, and people asked about this, and my grandmother died a few months before I started writing this book, and I think that inspired the grandmother character in my book. I started the first draft during lockdown and March of
Mm,
2020, and I think that uncertainty and that sort of isolation brought out a sort of darker facet in my writing. I was watching a lot of samurai movies around that time too, and that was an influence. Um, and I think this cultural conversation we're having about people sort of reconsidering their relationships in the past, the people that they thought of as being their heroes, uh, were really their abusers because like they told a certain story about themselves that helped them survive, and they couldn't allow themselves to be thought of as victims, so they had to reshape a narrative, and that narrative suits you for a certain point until it doesn't.
uh-huh. So what were the steps that you took to take your book from initial inspiration to a finished product?
Oh, there were a lot of like steps, to be honest, like more steps than I wish there were, to be honest. I wrote this book, the first draft, and I think around 3 months, and that part of writing is really fun. Just sort of like exploring things and just sort of being immersed in it. And that was really, really helpful during those months of lockdown.
Mm.
Um, and then you let it sit, and then you sort of rewrite it, and you know that certain things aren't working, and you kind of like smooth out those things to some extent. Because I had like two or three endings like that for my original novel that didn't make sense. I realized at some point that the ending was actually like 30 pages before uh, I originally ended the novel. I think that was a real sort of uh, revelation. And another thing would be just like having friends read it and just sort of like not even make suggestions, but like just tell me what they thought the story was about. And you could see by the things that didn't come through and the way they talked about it that like you had to sort of keep working.
So are you a pantser or an outliner? It sounds like
Oh,
you're more of a pantser.
I'm definitely more of a pantser, but like you kind of have like a major couple of major things, for your story. Because you want to get some momentum before you hit a wall. And so you have a couple of major things that you think will happen to your characters as you start. But then as you write it, you discover more about your characters, you discover more about what the subplots are. And that's, I think, hopefully at that point, like there's a story has its own momentum and it kind of takes you to places that are interesting. Yeah, but yeah, primarily a pantser. I try to outline and I try to reverse outline like after I've written something, and that sometimes helps, but it's hard. It's hard to be a plotter. I've tried and tried and tried.
Hmm. Now, so when you said you had a couple of different endings to your story, it sounded as though you were a pantser because it sounds as though the characters took you in different directions.
Yeah, another thing I thought that I haven't mentioned that was an inspiration was this really great novel by Willie Loughton called Lean on Pete about a boy who loses his one guardian and lives on his own and steals a horse and then runs off. And that story had three parts. And so when I was writing my version, a kind of a story like that, like I had three parts in my head, and I was really stuck to this third part, and it didn't work. I completely rewrote it, like a couple of times, and then I realized that I didn't need a story with three parts. I had two parts that were fine, and so that was something that was really an interesting revelation. Yeah, yeah, it's like yeah, once again, yeah, I think yeah, you discover things and then you discover what you need, and it's a career writing term called scaffolding, where like you tell the story to yourself in the first draft, and then you sort of tell it to the readers in the second draft. So I think in that process, I had to sort of strip away some of the original sort of ideas I had about the story.
Oh, interesting. Um, so did you have to do any research for this book?
Oh yeah, a bit, like Benny's upbringing in Chinatown. While I didn't exactly grow up in Chinatown, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother who lived in that area in Vancouver. And so I used a lot, I drew a lot from my memories there, as a way to just start into the story. And I guess later on when the main character Benson, talks about his obsession with like Japanese swordplay. I did a little bit of reading about the parts of the Japanese sword, a samurai sword, and uh, I attended a few classes of Japanese sort of sword based martial arts. And I think that was pretty interesting. I'm trying to think whether I had any other research, and I don't think so, actually, beyond that.
Okay. So, what was your favorite research story in any of your books? Do you have a
Well,
favorite?
like I guess I wrote a couple of books about horse racing, and
Yeah.
going through old, copies of Life magazine was really interesting. I went to I traveled to Toronto to look through like the reference library and to go through like uh, old pages of a defunct newspaper, the Toronto Telegram. That was really interesting. Going to racetracks and learning about the horse I was writing about was really fun. So that was probably the most fun in terms of research. I've also done travel writing, and that's a lot of fun too.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, is horse racing one of your hobbies?
It was for a certain point, like my daughter loves going to the track, so I try to take her there like once a year in Vancouver, and just like seeing the horses and being out there. And I dabbled in it, but it's funny. I've written two books about
Yeah.
being interested in horses, and people still sort of send me letters or like they correct me on things I get wrong. So I can't say I'm an expert, despite writing those two books, and it's kind of funny uh, that yeah, yeah, it's something that has been of an interest to me, but I can't say I'm an expert or anything like that.
Okay. So, what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out the double life of Benson You?
The biggest challenge, huh? Um, I was really surprised by how quickly an editor took an interest in the book. Like once I found an agent, but um, trying to make sense. I have a twist in the second part of the story where, like, the young Benson meets up with the older Benson, sort of like time travel and a melding of worlds, and that was a twist that sort of again was pantsed out of me. Like I just decided to do it halfway through, and I spent the longest time trying to figure out how to set up the first part so that the second part wasn't as abrupt and jarring as it was. And what I came up was having, the adult narrator be more of a presence in the first half, which was sort of, I think some readers found that a bit challenging and tricky, and I kind of get it. It's not the most
Mhm.
straightforward book, but that was the toughest part, and I found a fix for it, but I'm not sure if everyone agrees with that fix.
Okay. Can you tell us what the fix was?
Oh, just having the reader sort of like, having the narrator appear in the first
Oh,
half
okay.
and talking. Yeah.
Ah, okay. So was there any character that you loved or hated the most in your book?
Yeah, there was one character named C, and he's just somebody who is like inspiration for another character in the book, but he's this really dark, sort of toxic figure. And in some ways, I wanted to write him as little as possible. I wanted him to be a presence, but then, like when he appeared, like I wanted to write him just enough that you could see him, but I didn't want to sort of bask in his presence. So he only physically appears for a chapter in the book, but he's like a real presence throughout.
Is it hard to write a character like that?
Yeah, yeah, and especially when you're writing kind of like darker themes, like child abuse, and this is like a abuser, like, and you don't want to necessarily describe certain things like gratuitously. You want to do it in a way that's respectful of people who might feel like triggered by it, and so
Ah,
um, yeah, that was a bit of a challenge.
right. So, what else can we expect from you in the near future?
In the near future, I don't know, to be honest. Like I had a novel idea that I was working on, and then it got stuck about a year ago, and I feel like I had to start something new, and walk away from it for the time being. Um, I'm doing a bit of journalism, like local Vancouver history, for a local magazine, and that might not be interesting to people at Annie's, but that's what I'm doing. And you can check out my work at thatkevinchong.com, and my Twitter handles is thatkevinchong, and my Instagram is thatkevinchong. So yeah, you can once I figure out what I am going to do next, I'll let you all know.
Okay, sounds great. I have some questions now about being a writer. What's your
Okay.
favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Well, it's not this. It's definitely not having a book out, like a new book. I find that like really like at least a lot of self-obsession, and checking of rankings and reviews and things like that. So that's not my favorite part. My favorite part is probably like writing the draft of a new book and getting to the point where you just know that you're gonna finish it. Yeah, and it's like you've got this sort of wind on your back. It's kind of like flying, and it's or your feet are leaving the ground and you think you're gonna fly or something like that. And so yeah, that's definitely my favorite part. I would also say, printing out your draft when you're done is another favorite part. I don't usually work that much with paper manuscript these days, it's mostly on screens, but having that first draft is really exciting. And having a finished copy of your book is really exciting before the book actually comes out. That's really great. Like all that stuff is really fun. Like it's just that sort of self-obsession, which I find a little difficult.
Mm, okay. So what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process?
The most challenging part of the writing process, like sometimes, you get stuck, and I've been stuck. I spent like 10 years between my first novel coming out and my second novel coming out, and there was a lot of sort of almost performance anxiety where you like made excuses about when you would write, and when you actually found time to write, you just sort of like fiddled and procrastinated, and it's kind of like being in that headspace where you can allow yourself to be kind of mediocre and to test things without sort of shutting down. Those are really tough times in terms of being a writer, and I feel like I'm past that now, but you never know because every book is really different, and every time you start sitting down to write, I'm not exactly sure what's going to come of it, and so um I think that is like really tough about writing. There's a lot of sort of self-doubt, like sort of,
Mm, yeah, many writers have mentioned the self-doubt aspects of it, but everybody's gotten their books out,
Mhm.
you know.
Eventually.
Yeah, eventually, yeah. So it's great. Even with the self-doubt, you have to, persevere, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
My favorite adventure. Well, that's kind of interesting. Like I said, I've done travel writing, and like that has allowed me to go to places I would not have been able to do on my own dime, and it's really sort of opened up the world to me. Like I've gone to Easter Island and
Wow.
Jordan, where I saw the stone temples of Petra, and I've been on safari in Africa, South Africa, and in Kenya. And those are all sort of mind expanding experiences, and so being able to see the world because you're a writer really is a treat.
Mm. Oh yeah, that must have been amazing.
Mhm.
So what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
Uh, Greatest lesson, I would say probably that, while writing is very solitary, like you're part of a community, like, and I talk to my students not in terms of being professional in terms of their habits, but being a community member, because like I think a lot of times people who are professional, so-called professionals, behave terribly, but if you're part of a community, you show people respect, and you go to their events, you help them out. There's a lot of sort of work you have to do, emotional labor that you have to do, and sometimes it's hard to draw boundaries, but you should try to find ways in which you can give to others as a writer.
Okay. So is that the piece of advice that you would give to new writers, or do you have any others?
Oh, well, yeah, that'd be the piece of advice I would. Oh, it depends on the situation. If it's like more sort of craft based, like
Hmm.
I would say, like with like say writing dialogue, like you don't have to say hi so much. You can condense things. Get to the point where it's interesting. Like or the line that Kurt Vonnegut gives. Like always give your characters something to want, even if it's a glass of water. Like I'm paraphrasing poorly, but that's a real good
Hmm.
point, that I think about a lot in terms of like where my characters are in the story. Um, and so, yeah, it's all situational in terms of what the kind of advice is. It depends on what people ask for.
Hmm. Okay. Now, are there any, you mentioned about a community, are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that helped you that in your career that might be helpful to other writers?
Yeah, just being part of a couple of creative writing programs. Like I went to the one here in Vancouver, the University of British Columbia's creative writing school, and then I went to Columbia University for my MFA, and I've lifelong friends as a result of that, and you know, like friendly rivals too. You know, like people that you can sort of check in on and see how they're doing, and it sort of motivates you. You know, I think that's really useful. Um, I think you could, yeah, in terms of groups, in Canada we have the Writers Union, and I think there's an Authors Guild in the U.S., and they're really helpful in terms of sort of advocating for writers and having sort of social events. I know a lot of people are meeting up online using social media to sort of meet their folks, and I think that's really great too.
Hmm. Right. Okay. Um, Now I have questions about you as a person. What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
What is one thing people don't realize about me?
Hmm.
Uh, I don't really know if they're like, I don't know what people do know about me and don't know about me. You know, like I have a Wikipedia page that an old friend at some point like sort of vandalized to say that I'm a show dog handler and that
Oh,
I'm like a jazz musician named Butterscotch Panda. And as a result, you know, like I've been introduced onto stages as, you know, a jazz musician and a Tai Bo practitioner and a show dog handler, you know, and all those things are not true. So I guess that's one thing. I have a much more prosaic real life story.
so you are none of those things?
I am none of those things, and it created this feedback loop where like websites that sort of scraped off Wikipedia would, you know, use that detail, and then Wikipedia would use those websites as, you know, sources, you know, and so yeah, there's nothing I can do at this point. You know, it's all baked in, but it's not true.
Other Kevin Chongs.
Yeah.
Aha, I see. Okay. Okay. Um, so what is or are your passions when you're not writing? And how do you make time for the things that you love?
Oh, my biggest sort of passion outside of my family and writing is I play a lot of pickup soccer. I'm not a really good soccer player, you know, like I'm actually pretty mediocre, and because I never really played it in an organized way like growing up, but as an adult, I've started playing, and I'll play like whenever I can find a game in the middle of the day, and I'll drive 30 minutes out of the way to play, and it takes like, you know, 3 hours out of my day, but that's just I just love doing it, and I love playing, and how do I make time for it? It's I always think about a line I read from Rachel Cusk where, you know, people say you never say I don't have time for an affair, you know, I can't make
Hmm.
time for it, you know, like if it's a thing that you love the most, you everything else sort of moves around in its wake, you know, and
Hmm.
so I feel that way about writing too, you know, like like I my days are so busy in terms of just having meetings and reading student work. But once I have an idea, like I feel like that just fills out all the cracks I have in spare time, and I have that sort of focus. And so I think when you have an idea or you have a passion, at least for me, it sort of fill out those moments where you would otherwise be watching TV or fiddling around on the internet, you know. And I have to say that I don't have a 9 to 5 job. You know, I'm a teacher, and I've got like times I have to teach, and I have meeting times. But then there are all these parts of the day that, you know, are normally filled up with like reading manuscripts or doing other sort of work, academic work, that you can kind of push aside or move aside to do the things you feel passionate about.
Okay. So what does your writing space look like? And what do you need to
Uh,
have what do you need to have around you when you're writing?
my writing space is a little office. You're seeing part of it right now, and it's got. I've just started putting art up on the walls. It was pretty bare up to then, and I've got some books on the shelves in front of me. And in terms of what I need, I don't think I need a lot, to be honest. Like I need like a desk or a flat space, a table, and most of the time I need a computer. And if not, then sometimes pen and paper. I don't really write a ton on pen and paper, but I have,
Mhm.
and um, yeah, like I guess if I'm writing nonfiction, it's good to have like an internet connection or some reference books. But if I'm writing fiction, not as necessary.
Okay. Do you need to have like a certain drink or snacks or something like that?
I drink coffee, when I'm writing, and I'm not always sure that's the best thing because I get all sort of wired, and I have like little sort of lulls and crash. But yeah, I'm not that particular. I try to like be able to write anywhere, like when I have the time and I have the motivation.
Okay. Now, when you're writing, do you need silence or do you listen to music? And if you listen to music, what kind?
I don't listen to music. In terms of I live in a house with my family, so it's never that quiet. Like it's nice when no one's around. I feel like I can work a little better that way. Um, but like it's hard to write when someone's talking. Like you're in a room and there's someone talking, and so if that's happening, then I put on headphones and I play some white noise, and that's pretty helpful. So yeah, music doesn't work for me. Sometimes white noise does.
Ah, okay. Um, Now writers very often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions to help them with their work. And do you have any, and do they help or hinder you?
I've got two cats, and they probably hinder me more than anything else, but I don't hate them or anything like that. They just sort of get in the way, or they yell at you from behind the office door. One of them was I think yelling in the background just a second ago, actually. Um, and I once did a job interview on Zoom, or I guess it was Skype back then, and one of the cats sort of climbed on my desk at the time, and so uh, they can be kind of troublesome, but I don't know, they're fine.
All right. I just have two more questions for you. Well, actually, you already answered one of them, which is how can people follow your work and share your awesomeness? And you've already answered that with your Instagram
Yeah,
and
that Kevin
webpage
Chong. That Kevin Chong, yeah.
and your
Instagram,
webpage
Twitter, and .com. Yeah.
and your webpage also,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But my last question is, how can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And I have to always plug Annie's. And you can get the Double Life of Benson You at Annie's if you call us at 508-796-5613, or you can send us an email at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. So where else can people find your book?
You can find them online. Like you find them online in all the usual places, but it's better to go to Annie's. It's better to go to like an independent bookstore. You can, yeah, yeah. Like I think if you go to like my web page, you'll see some links for uh, indie purchases along with other places too, and so yeah, yeah, place like Annie's would be the best.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for being with me, and we wish you good luck with the Double Life events at Woo.
Thank you so much, Selena.